The galaxy had known humans for a long time. They were seen as peaceful, curious, and full of ideas. They traded with other species, built cities on moons, and shared knowledge freely. To most alien eyes, humanity was a calm and balanced civilization, never too loud, never too violent. They seemed to have left their old days of war far behind. Across the stars, the Galactic Council often spoke of Earth's people with a kind of soft respect. They are builders, the elder races said. They are thinkers. They are no longer dangerous. And for many years that was true. Humanity had chosen peace, tired of the endless fighting that once defined their history. But deep inside the human heart, something old still slept. It wasn't anger and it wasn't hate. It was something more ancient than words. It was the instinct to protect, to stand against darkness when no one else would. The stories of old wars had faded, but that instinct never died. It waited quiet and unseen like a spark buried under ash. For centuries, no one dared to test it. Humans sent explorers, scientists, and diplomats to every corner of known space. They made friends, signed treaties, and built colonies where people from dozens of worlds lived together. Children grew up learning about alien art, alien languages, and alien cultures. It looked like humanity had finally found peace, not only with themselves but with the universe. Yet there were those who doubted. In secret, a few alien leaders whispered among themselves. They are too calm, one said. Too quiet. No species simply forgets war. Another agreed. Perhaps they are pretending. Perhaps they wait for a reason. But the council brushed those fears aside. Humanity had done nothing wrong, and suspicion would only create conflict. So the galaxy let its guard down. On Earth and her colonies, life continued normally. People worked, dreamed, built families, and looked toward the stars not with fear but with hope. Great cities floated in orbit powered by sunlight. Massive stations surrounded planets rich in life. Humanity's ships crossed the void carrying food, medicine, and knowledge to distant systems. Everywhere they went, they built, helped, and healed. But peace has a strange way of testing itself. It was not humanity that broke the calm. It was something far from their control, a choice made in greed and arrogance by others who thought they understood humans better than humans understood themselves. Far beyond the edge of the Sol system, an empire of alien species had been watching. They saw Earth's resources, its rare minerals, its energy fields, its perfect planets, and they saw opportunity. To them, humans were weak. They spoke kindly but never threatened. They shared their discoveries freely. And in a galaxy where power meant survival, such kindness looked like weakness. We will take what they will not defend, one commander said during a private meeting. They are soft. They will surrender quickly. It will be easy. And so the plan began. It started small. A mining ship near the edge of human territory disappeared. Then another. Communications from a far colony went silent. At first, humanity thought it was just a technical problem. A solar flare, a malfunction, maybe even pirates. But then a message was received. It was short and filled with static, but clear enough to send chills across every listening station. They are here, fleets, not human. After that, nothing. The Galactic Council watched quietly. Some of its members already knew who was behind the attacks, but chose not to speak. To them, this was a test. If humans truly were peaceful, they would surrender and become another controlled species. If they fought back, well, that would reveal the truth of what they really were. On Earth, leaders met in silence. The atmosphere was heavy. No one shouted, no one panicked. They simply listened to the reports one after another, as the reality of what was happening sank in. Human colonies were being invaded. Civilian ships were being captured. Entire families vanished into the dark. For the first time in centuries, the peace humans had built began to crack. But what the attackers did not know was that this peace had not made humanity weak. It had made them patient. It had taught them to value life, and that value made them dangerous when threatened. Across the planet, people stopped their daily routines and turned their eyes to the sky. The news spread like a storm. There were no protests, no chaos. Just a heavy stillness, as if something deep and old was waking up inside every person who heard the news. Soldiers who had never seen war began to train again. Engineers left their offices and returned to shipyards. Factories that once built machines for farming and transport started to hum with a new rhythm, one that sounded like preparation. Humanity didn't move out of fear. It moved out of purpose. The galaxy saw nothing unusual yet. The aliens who started the invasion sent messages demanding surrender. They received no reply. They assumed it was fear, but on Earth the silence meant something else entirely. It meant unity. Humanity didn't argue about who should lead or which planet should take control. They moved as one mind. Old designs, forgotten blueprints from the age of interstellar wars were pulled from deep archives. Artificial intelligence systems began to calculate defense plans. Massive shipyards that had been sleeping for decades lit up once more. The stars above Earth glowed with the fire of rebirth, and in the middle of it all, people remembered. They remembered the stories told by grandparents, the ones about the times when humanity fought against impossible odds and still survived. They remembered the resilience, the will, the defiance that had carried them through every dark age in their history. Something had been awakened. Something that had been sleeping too long. The Galactic Council began to sense the change. Reports came in from observers near Earth. Massive energy readings. Construction activity increasing. Civilian fleets being refitted for combat. But the Council couldn't believe it. They can't be preparing for war, they said. They don't have the heart for it anymore. They were wrong. Deep underground, hidden command stations that hadn't been used in hundreds of years came back to life. Old weapon systems designed long ago and considered too terrible to ever use again were inspected and tested. Not because humanity wanted war, but because they would not kneel. For the first time in living memory, all of humanity was united under one purpose: survival with dignity. The world's divisions, politics, borders, cultures melted away. There was only one name that mattered now: Earth. And as the first wave of alien ships entered the outer edge of the system, a quiet calm settled across every human world. People didn't cry. They didn't scream. They just waited as if they all knew the same unspoken truth. The universe had rung a bell that should have never been touched. Something ancient had opened its eyes again. The humans, once seen as dreamers, builders and thinkers, were remembering what they really were when pushed too far. They were not peaceful because they were weak. They were peaceful because they knew the cost of awakening what slept inside them. The storm had not started yet. But in the silence that came before it, the galaxy began to tremble. Though it did not yet know why. Humanity had been underestimated before. This time the mistake would echo across the stars. The sleeping war gods were waking, and the sound of that awakening was not anger or shouting. It was quiet, steady, and unstoppable, like the beating of a heart that had just remembered its purpose. The aliens thought they had found an easy victory. What they had really found was the end of their certainty, because when humans awaken, they do not fight only to survive. They fight to protect everything that makes them human: their home, their children, their freedom, and their right to dream. And no empire in the galaxy was ready to face that. It began quietly, almost like a mistake. The first alien fleet entered human space without warning. Their ships were sleek and massive, glowing with unfamiliar energy. To them, this was not an invasion, it was a lesson. They wanted to remind humanity of their place in the galaxy. They wanted submission without bloodshed. Their leaders believed that humans had grown soft under peace. They saw humans as clever but harmless, builders, not fighters. "They will surrender quickly," one of them said before the fleet launched. "They have no stomach for war." But that belief was the first mistake. At first they attacked small outposts, mining colonies, research stations, and communication satellites. These places were not built for battle. Civilians tried to talk, tried to reason, but the invaders had no interest in words. They disabled systems, took prisoners, and raised their flags over human territory. When the news reached Earth, no one shouted or panicked. Instead, the world fell into a strange silence, the calm before something greater. People looked at their screens, reading the messages, watching the reports, and for a long moment they said nothing. It wasn't fear. It was the realization that peace had ended. In space stations and colonies, humans began evacuating civilians. Cargo ships turned into rescue vessels. Pilots who had never flown in combat volunteered to help. Across every settlement, there was one shared thought: protect each other no matter what. The alien fleet, confident in their victory, moved deeper into human space. They recorded their progress, certain that the Council would praise them for putting Earth in its place. But they didn't understand that every action they took was feeding something far greater than fear. It was feeding unity. The aliens captured a small human colony orbiting a quiet star. The colony didn't resist. It simply went silent. The invaders thought they had won again. What they didn't know was that their every move was being recorded, analyzed, and shared among humans across the system. The quiet wasn't surrender, it was coordination. On Earth, the leaders gathered once more. The same calm filled the room, but this time it was different. This silence wasn't shock, it was focus. They had seen the threat clearly now, and they knew what needed to be done. "Do not respond," one of them said. "Let them think we are afraid. Let them believe we are weak." And so humanity stayed silent. The aliens kept pushing forward, laughing at how easy it all seemed. They didn't see the preparations happening behind the calm faces and quiet signals. In the deep void between planets, hidden bases came alive. Factories once used for exploration and research shifted into overdrive. Materials that had been stored for centuries, metals stronger than steel, engines designed for forgotten warships were brought out and reassembled. The young engineers worked day and night, their eyes filled not with fear but determination. They had never seen real war. Yet something inside them understood what was coming. It was as if every human alive could feel a rhythm in the distance, a quiet drumbeat calling them to prepare. The first human response wasn't made of weapons. It was made of silence, patience, and strategy. Communication channels went dark. Civilian ships changed their routes. Military ships vanished from sensors. To the invaders, it looked like chaos. To humanity, it was order taking shape. The alien fleet commander grew confident. "They hide," he said. "They run. They know what they are." But if he could have seen the hidden transmissions racing between Earth and the far colonies, he would have understood the truth. Humanity wasn't hiding. They were waiting. In the empty dark of space, the alien ships drifted proudly past burned stations and abandoned colonies. They didn't notice the small signals being sent from debris fields. They didn't know that every move they made was being tracked. Every engine flare, every course correction, every weapon signature, all of it was recorded. Human scientists studied those signals quietly. They learned fast. They always had. On one distant moon, workers dug into old storage vaults, ancient weapons from a time when Earth had fought its own great wars. Machines built for defense, sealed away after peace was declared, now hummed again for the first time in generations. The air was filled with tension, but not despair. Humanity didn't speak of revenge. They spoke of survival, of justice, of defending what they had built with patience and love. Every person understood the same truth. If they lost now, everything they had ever created would be erased. Across the stars, the Galactic Council watched in silence. Some were uneasy. "Perhaps we should intervene," one said. But the others shook their heads. "It will be over soon," they replied. "Humans cannot stand against such fleets." They were wrong again. The aliens reached the outer planets and began to target communication hubs. They thought they were cutting off Earth's ability to respond. But humanity had already changed their systems. Their networks were now hidden under coded signals that no outsider could read. Every destroyed station only bought more time for the factories deep beneath Earth's surface. Every delay gave engineers a few more hours to finish what they were building, and humanity was building something powerful. Not just ships, but unity. Families volunteered for support missions. Farmers offered their harvest to feed soldiers. Students learned how to assist in repair crews. The world became one giant heartbeat, and that heartbeat grew stronger every day. Meanwhile, the invaders started to notice something strange. Their scanners picked up ghost signals, energy readings that appeared and vanished without trace. Small ships that shouldn't exist were moving in patterns too perfect to be random. They began to feel uneasy, but pride blinded them. "It's nothing," their leader said. "Just old machines or static interference." They didn't understand that they were walking deeper into a trap that was being built with precision. On the far edge of the system, a small fleet of human ships appeared briefly on scanners. The aliens moved to engage, thinking they had finally found the enemy. But when they arrived, the human ships were gone and all that was left was empty space. Then another fleet appeared somewhere else and vanished again. They didn't know it, but humanity was studying them, testing their response times, their tactics, their formation speed. Every false signal was a lesson. Every reaction from the enemy gave humans what they needed. On Earth, engineers celebrated quietly as they cracked the final codes of the invaders' weapon systems. "We understand them now," one whispered. "We know how they fight." The aliens were still laughing, still proud of their victories. But those victories were hollow, and the humans knew it. Each planet they took was already stripped of its people and data. Each attack gave humanity more time to prepare. Then came the day when the aliens decided to strike Earth directly. They gathered their ships and formed a massive fleet near the edge of the system. They sent one last message across space, a demand for surrender. There was no reply. For them, the silence meant fear. For humanity, it meant readiness. In the dark, human warships began to rise from hidden hangars. Massive vessels that had slept for centuries now glowed like new stars. Their engines rumbled softly, echoing through the void. Pilots took their seats, hands steady, hearts calm. They knew what they were about to do would change everything. The first signal was sent, a single pulse of light. It was simple, ancient, and unmistakable. Humanity was done waiting. Far away, the alien commanders sat on their bridges, watching as unknown signals filled their scanners. They couldn't understand what they were seeing. One by one, more signals appeared. Dozens, hundreds, then thousands. The silence they had mocked had become a storm they couldn't predict. Humanity had awakened. Not in rage, but in unity. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but history had just shifted. The bell had been rung and something powerful had answered. And as the alien fleets began to advance toward Earth, they didn't realize they had already lost the one thing that could save them: time. Because when humans finally rise, they don't move with panic. They move with purpose. And purpose is something no empire, no army, and no invader can ever truly defeat. The night sky over Earth looked the same as always. Quiet, peaceful, full of stars. But deep beneath the calm, something was changing. Humanity was no longer asleep. The spark had turned into a slow, steady fire. All across the planet, silent movements began. In the mountains, in deep oceans, in forgotten deserts, old bases lit up with soft blue lights. People who had never even seen war now worked beside veterans who had studied the ancient ways of defense. Humanity was no longer reacting, it was preparing. There was no shouting, no speeches of revenge. The air was filled with calm voices and focused eyes. Engineers worked without rest, turning scrapyards into factories. Scientists reactivated machines that hadn't run for hundreds of years. Entire cities began to work together as if they were one single mind. The invaders still believed they had control. They thought humans were afraid. But if they could have seen the inside of those secret facilities, they would have understood the truth. Humanity was awake, and it was remembering who it really was. Every part of human history had been built on survival. From the moment their ancestors first walked on 2 feet, humans had learned to fight against nature, against hunger, against fear itself. It was never about violence, it was about endurance. And that same spirit now filled the air again. Farmers gave their harvests freely to feed workers in shipyards. Students stopped their studies and volunteered to repair machines. Doctors prepared emergency wards without being told. Nobody needed orders. They all knew what was coming. It was a quiet understanding that stretched across the entire human race. Old technologies were reborn. Ancient satellites were brought back online, and lost data from past wars was recovered. Scientists studied old blueprints that had once been sealed away under the promise of peace. They found designs for weapons, ships, and shields that had never been built, creations too powerful for the old world. But now those designs became plans of hope. The factories didn't build war for conquest, they built defense. Every screw, every beam, every engine was made with care. They were not building machines to destroy. They were building walls to protect what they loved. Meanwhile, in the far corners of the galaxy, the alien coalition began to notice strange activity. Their scanners picked up massive energy surges across the human system. Entire planets seemed to hum with hidden power, but their leaders laughed it off. "They are trying to scare us," they said. "They can't do anything real." They didn't understand that humans never needed to scare anyone. When they decide to act, they simply act. In deep space, huge hangars opened. The old warships, dark, silent, and enormous, began to rise again. They had been built generations ago and kept in sleep mode for a time no one thought would come. Now, one by one, they came alive. The engines roared like thunder across the void. and their hulls reflected the light of nearby stars. Pilots entered their ships quietly, fastening their harnesses with calm faces. None of them had ever fought in space before, but each of them carried something ancient in their hearts, the same determination that had carried their ancestors through every dark age in history. There was no fear, only focus. In the command stations, human strategists worked day and night. They mapped every star, every orbit, every asteroid field. They studied their enemies' movements with precision. No one wanted unnecessary destruction. Humanity didn't seek chaos, they sought control. Every move they planned was measured and deliberate. While the galaxy thought humans were trembling, they were instead planning something so vast, so perfectly coordinated, that even the Council couldn't imagine it. The invaders' fleet began to advance toward the inner system, proud and confident. They broadcast messages demanding humanity's surrender. No reply came. The silence made them laugh. But that silence wasn't weakness, it was timing. Humanity was waiting for the exact moment to strike. On Earth, the people watched the sky. They didn't hide in fear. They stood outside at night looking at the stars, knowing their defenders were preparing up there. Children drew pictures of spaceships and called them protectors. Parents whispered promises that everything would be fine. And somehow everyone believed it. It wasn't blind faith, it was trust in what humanity could become when it stood together. One evening, as the alien fleets drew closer, the skies above Earth began to shimmer faintly. Most people didn't notice at first, but in observatories around the planet, scientists stared in awe. It was the reflection of massive ships rising from the shadows of the moon, moving silently into formation. The first human defense fleet had awakened. Each ship was enormous, but elegant. They weren't covered in spikes or banners like alien vessels. Their design was simple, clean, and powerful, made for one purpose, to protect. As they aligned into perfect formation, their engines glowed with pale blue light like stars reborn. At that moment, the human race didn't feel fear anymore. They felt pride. Not arrogance, not hate, just pride in what they had achieved together. The quiet unity that had built those ships was stronger than any weapon. The alien fleet, still far away, began to detect strange signals. Their scanners picked up thousands of small energy readings moving in patterns they couldn't understand. They didn't realize that they were seeing drones, tiny human machines moving in silent waves, building traps, preparing fields of defense, gathering data. The aliens grew nervous. Something didn't feel right. The humans were too quiet, too organized. Yet they couldn't stop now. Their pride was too strong. They believed they were destined to rule. Back on Earth, the command centers received final reports. Every satellite, every ship, every defense system was ready. The order wasn't given with shouting or drama. It was spoken calmly, almost softly. Begin Phase 1. In that instant, the human defense network came alive. Invisible shields flickered into place around key planets. Drones formed walls of moving light. Communications spread across every colony, every base, every station. Humanity was no longer separate worlds. It was one living network of minds and hearts. Even the people who weren't fighting played their part. Artists sent messages of hope. Children recorded songs and shared them across the colonies. It wasn't about courage anymore, it was about identity. The invaders could never understand that kind of strength. The alien fleets entered the system ready for easy victory. But as they advanced, their sensors began to fail. Their systems jammed. Their maps went blank. The humans had turned the space around them into a maze of invisible traps and false signals. For the first time, the invaders hesitated. Something deep inside them, something instinctive, told them they had made a mistake. And then they saw it. At the edge of the void, glowing faintly in the distance, were shapes. Massive, cold, silent shapes. Human ships, thousands of them. They weren't moving fast. They weren't charging in anger. They were gliding forward slowly, confidently, like something that had been doing this for ages. The invaders realized too late that the silence wasn't fear. It was the sound of awakening. For humanity, this wasn't just a battle. It was a reminder. A reminder that they were not fragile. That peace had not made them weak, it had made them wise. The fleets took position. The alien ships began transmitting warnings, still trying to speak from pride. But humans didn't respond, not yet. They waited for the first move, calm and steady. The galaxy watched in disbelief. No one had expected this. No one had believed that the quiet species could rise like this. The Council's sensors captured the sight. Thousands of human ships moving together as if one will guided them all. It was no longer a question of survival. It was destiny. Humanity had awakened, not just as individuals, but as something greater, a force built from courage, memory, and unity. They didn't want war, but they wouldn't run from it either. And as the two great fleets faced each other in the silent dark of space, a strange calm filled the void. It wasn't peace and it wasn't chaos. It was the moment before history changed forever. For the first time in ages, the galaxy would learn what it truly meant when humanity opened its eyes. The stars burned quietly as the two fleets faced each other in the emptiness of space. The alien ships stood in tight formations, shining with red and gold lights, their weapons ready and locked. They had no idea what they were about to face. On the other side, the human fleet floated in silence. Their ships moved like shadows, calm, steady, and perfectly aligned. There was no panic, no shouting across the channels. Every pilot, every officer, every engineer knew exactly what to do. Humanity had waited long enough. Now the time for silence was over. The first move came from the invaders. A single bright beam cut across the darkness, hitting one of the smaller human ships. For a moment, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then came the response, not a scream of anger, but precision. The human fleet shifted position with flawless coordination. Their ships didn't fire wildly. They aimed, calculated, and struck only once. The beam from the alien ship vanished as its energy core overloaded and faded into the black. That was the moment the galaxy changed forever. The invaders expected fear and confusion, but what they saw instead was terrifying in its calmness. The humans fought not like a desperate species trying to survive, but like professionals who had done this countless times before. Across the void, the alien commanders shouted orders. Their fleets split into dozens of attack groups surrounding the human formation. But humanity had already anticipated every move. Their ships turned in perfect arcs, cutting through the enemy lines like a tide that knew where every stone lay beneath it. Each human vessel moved with purpose. No shot was wasted. Every strike found its mark. The space around them filled with flashes of light as alien ships were disabled one after another. Humanity didn't aim to destroy. They aimed to disarm, to end the threat with control, not chaos. On Earth, people watched the battle unfold through live feeds. The tension was heavy, but so was the pride. In the faces of those watching, there was awe. They were seeing the side of humanity that had been asleep for so long, the side that didn't break when challenged. In the command centers, operators spoke softly, their hands steady over glowing consoles. Every voice was calm. Orders were given with precision. There was no shouting, no confusion, only focus, adjust formation. Redirect power. Prepare defense grid. Each command moved through the network like a heartbeat, perfectly synchronized. The alien fleets tried everything. They launched waves of drones, fired long-range missiles, and attempted to jam human systems. But humanity had already adapted. Within seconds, new countermeasures appeared. Old satellite networks became shields. Civilian ships joined in as decoys and rescuers. Everyone played a part. The invaders didn't understand how humans could respond so fast. They didn't know that every person in the system was connected, sharing information, reacting together as one. Humanity wasn't fighting for territory. They were fighting for their home, their families, and the right to exist without fear. That kind of motivation couldn't be measured in technology or strategy. It came from the soul. The alien commanders grew desperate. Their ships began to lose formation. Panic rippled through their ranks. They sent distress calls back to their empires, begging for reinforcements. But by then it was too late. Humanity had already taken control of the battlefield. One by one, the invaders' ships fell silent. Some retreated. Some drifted powerless in the void. And yet the humans didn't chase them. They didn't celebrate. They simply secured their space, rescued survivors, and restored calm. To outsiders watching from distant worlds, it looked like the rise of an unstoppable power. But to humans, it was something deeper. It was a reminder of who they truly were when unity mattered more than fear. As the battle ended, a strange quiet returned. The stars looked peaceful again. But everyone knew what that peace cost. Humanity had awakened, and now the entire galaxy had seen it. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council received thousands of reports. Every sensor across the sector had captured fragments of the battle. The data was unbelievable. Human ships had performed maneuvers thought to be impossible. Their targeting accuracy, their energy control, their ability to coordinate across light years, all of it defied logic. For centuries, the Council had thought of Earth as a young and harmless civilization. Now that image was shattered. They called for emergency meetings. Some demanded immediate contact with humanity to calm the situation. Others argued that they should prepare for defense, afraid that the sleeping giant might turn its power on them next. But the truth was, humanity wasn't interested in conquest. They didn't want empires. They only wanted safety and respect. On Earth, the people mourned the losses quietly. Even though their victory was clear, the cost was not forgotten. Every ship that didn't return, every signal lost in the static was remembered. But in those memories, there was no regret. There was pride. Factories that had built weapons now turned their focus back to rebuilding. Engineers who had worked through sleepless nights now began restoring communication with allied colonies. Humanity didn't gloat. They rebuilt, stronger and wiser. The message sent to the galaxy was simple and clear. It was not spoken in words, but in actions. We do not seek war. But if war comes, we will end it swiftly. In deep space, the remaining alien ships limped away, damaged and silent. Their crews had seen something they couldn't explain. They had seen a species that fought without rage, without hate, but with the quiet certainty of those who defend what they love. Rumors spread across the galaxy faster than light. Some said humans had discovered forgotten technology. Others whispered that humans were not truly mortal, but something older, something beyond understanding. But those who had seen the battle up close knew the truth. It wasn't magic or divine power. It was discipline, unity, and an unbreakable will. A few alien envoys tried to reach Earth afterward, offering apologies and negotiations. Humanity received them kindly but firmly. The message was the same. Peace could return, but never again would Earth be underestimated. Meanwhile, across human space, people began to breathe easier. The danger wasn't gone, but the fear was. Children looked up at the stars with pride instead of worry. They knew that if the darkness ever came again, humanity would stand ready. And somewhere in the heart of the Milky Way, the Galactic Council sat in silence. Their leaders watched the recordings again and again, unable to believe what they had witnessed. One of them finally spoke, his voice heavy with realization. They were never weak, he said. They were only sleeping. That truth spread like wildfire. From one end of the galaxy to the other, the story of the battle reached every corner. Songs were written, stories told, lessons learned. Entire civilizations now spoke of humans not as traitors or thinkers, but as the species that remembered its strength when the universe forgot it. Back on Earth, the stars looked calm again. People went back to their lives, to work, to family, to laughter. But in the quiet of their hearts, they all carried the same understanding. Peace wasn't something that happened by chance. It was something they protected. And so humanity didn't return to sleep this time. They stayed alert, wise from the pain and victory that had awakened them. They built alliances carefully, helped other worlds rebuild, and shared their technology, but they never again let down their guard completely because they knew the universe now watched them with new eyes. Eyes that had seen what humans could become. When the bell was rung, in the stillness of night, under the glowing sky, people looked up and whispered softly to themselves, not in fear, not in pride, but in quiet understanding. The storm had passed. The danger had faded. But the strength that had awakened within them, it would never sleep again. The days after the battle were strange across the human worlds. People still woke up at the same hour, drank their morning coffee, and went to work. But something in the air had changed. It was like the whole planet was breathing differently, slower, deeper, prouder. Every screen, every conversation, every quiet moment carried the same question. What happens next? In the skies above Earth, damaged ships returned from the front lines. Their hulls were marked and scorched, but still standing. When they entered the atmosphere, people gathered outside to watch. There were no fireworks or loud parades, just silent respect. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a reminder of what humanity could do when it stood together. In hospitals, doctors worked around the clock treating those who had been injured during the defense. Volunteers arrived by the thousands, bringing supplies, helping families, comforting those who had lost someone. Humanity had seen enough destruction to understand that the real strength wasn't just in weapons, but in compassion. Everywhere, people helped each other. Factories once used to build war materials now produced tools for rebuilding damaged colonies. Engineers who had worked on warships now turned their knowledge to create better protection systems for civilian use. The same hands that fought were now repairing. But deep inside the command centers, humanity knew one thing clearly. The universe had changed forever. The Galactic Council, once confident and dismissive, now spoke of humanity with caution and respect. Reports from across distant star systems told the same story. Alien observers had watched the battle from far away and couldn't believe what they saw. They said humanity fought like they had been waiting for centuries, as if an ancient instinct had finally woken up. Some called it luck. Others whispered that humans carried something inside them, something that wasn't just intelligence but a deep old fire, a force that slept quietly until the moment it was needed. Back on Earth, in classrooms and research labs, people began to talk about what it meant to be human, not just in a scientific way but in a deeper personal sense. What made humanity different? Why did they fight so hard when others gave up? Why did they stand their ground even when the odds were impossible? The answer was different for everyone. Some said it was love, for family, for home, for the fragile beauty of life. Others said it was memory, the long history of struggle that shaped every generation. But everyone agreed on one truth. The will to survive was something no weapon could measure. As the weeks passed, more alien representatives arrived, not with threats but with messages of peace. They wanted to understand. They wanted to talk. For the first time, the galaxy was looking at humans not as newcomers but as equals. Meetings were held in orbiting stations. The discussions were cautious at first. There was tension in the air, but it wasn't born of fear. It was the tension of respect. Humanity's leaders spoke with calm authority. They didn't demand power or tribute. They only asked for fairness, for mutual safety, for understanding. The galaxy had expected vengeance. Instead, they found reason. It was one of the greatest surprises to those who had seen the battle. The same species that fought with unstoppable precision now chose peace without hesitation. It was confusing to many civilizations who only understood strength through domination. But humans had always been different. Their strength wasn't just in war, it was in choice. Across the stars, stories of the battle spread like a legend. On alien worlds, children whispered tales about the humans, the sleeping warriors who woke when the universe called. Poets wrote about the calmness in their eyes. Scientists studied the recordings, trying to understand how ordinary ships could move with such perfection. Some called humanity a paradox. Others called them hope. On Earth, life began to return to a steady rhythm. Farmers went back to their fields. Artists started painting the night sky with new meaning. Students studied harder, inspired by what humanity had achieved. There was a sense of belonging to something greater, not just a planet but a destiny. Yet not everything was peaceful. Deep in space, remnants of the defeated fleet still floated. Broken ships, damaged satellites, and lost data fragments drifted in silence. Some believed the surviving invaders would regroup. Some even feared that other empires, watching from afar, might see humanity's power as a threat. Humanity knew that peace could never mean sleeping again. Research centers began developing new defensive systems, not to attack, but to protect. Massive orbital platforms were built around the outer colonies. Drones patrolled the edges of human space, scanning the void for unusual activity. Every human world was connected through a network stronger than ever before. This time they would be ready. But even as they prepared, humanity didn't close its doors to others. They opened them wider. Human scientists worked alongside alien engineers. Medical teams shared knowledge across species. Trade routes reopened, this time built on trust instead of suspicion. Something beautiful was happening. The galaxy that once saw Earth as small and insignificant now found it becoming the heart of unity. Humanity had turned fear into friendship, power into peace. But peace didn't come without its quiet struggles. Veterans of the war carried heavy memories. Many found it hard to adjust to the calm after so much chaos. They missed the rush, the clarity of purpose. Others struggled with the question that haunted them. What if the bell rang again? Humanity had won, yes, but the echo of that awakening still lingered. Some scientists studied the psychological and biological data from the soldiers who fought. They found something strange, a kind of heightened focus that activated during crisis far beyond normal limits. It was as if the human brain remembered something ancient, buried deep in evolution, something that surfaced only when existence itself was threatened. They called it the awakening state, a condition where the mind, body, and instinct aligned perfectly. It explained the precision, the speed, the courage shown during the battle. It wasn't magic or mystery. It was human nature pushed to its highest potential. That discovery changed everything. Schools began teaching about it, not as a weapon, but as a lesson. Humanity didn't need superpowers to be strong. They already carried it within. The message spread through generations. Strength is not born from power, but from purpose. Months turned into years. The scars of war healed, but the lessons stayed alive. Humanity's presence in the galaxy became something respected and even admired. They weren't feared because of their weapons. They were honored because of their restraint. The Galactic Council eventually invited Earth to take a seat among them. It was a moment of quiet pride. Representatives from every major species gathered to witness it. When humanity's envoy entered the chamber, the hall fell silent. There was no cheering, no grand speech. Just a respectful nod. And in that nod was history. Centuries of struggle, unity, and survival. In the shadows of the chamber, some still whispered about the sleeping war gods. They believed the battle had only shown a fraction of what humans could do. But humanity didn't care for titles or myths. They cared for peace that lasted, for life that thrived. Back home, under the endless stars, people continued to dream. They built cities that reached the clouds, ships that could travel beyond known space. Children looked up and asked questions not about fear, but about discovery. The bell had been rung once and it had changed everything. But now humanity had learned something even greater, the power to choose silence after the storm. And in that silence, something peaceful and powerful grew. It was not the silence of sleep, but the calm of awareness, the kind that comes when a species truly understands itself. Every planet, every colony, every person carried that awareness. They knew what they were capable of. They knew that deep inside the same fire still burned, and they also knew that they didn't need to prove it again, because the galaxy had seen enough. The sleeping war gods had awakened once, and that was enough to make the stars remember. Time passed and the sounds of war faded into the background of history. Planets that had once burned with conflict now shone with new life. The stars that had witnessed destruction now watched quiet peace stretch across the galaxy. Humanity, once seen as the small, fragile race from a blue planet, had become a symbol of something greater: balance. The fleets that had once filled the skies were no longer tools of fear. They now floated in orbit, silent guardians of peace. The warships that had terrified the Council were kept intact, not as threats but as reminders. In museums and academies, children stood in awe beneath their massive hulls, listening to stories told by veterans who spoke not of victory, but of unity. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity, but what was more surprising was how humanity had learned to respect itself. People no longer saw themselves as weak or small. They had looked into the endless dark of space, faced civilizations older and stronger, and had not only survived but risen. Yet in victory they had not lost their heart. Across every human world, the message was the same: build, grow, protect. And remember, factories that once made weapons now built engines to travel deeper into space. Research centers focused on healing technologies and planetary renewal. Scientists and explorers worked together to understand the farthest corners of the universe. Humanity had realized something powerful. Their real strength was not in destruction, but in creation. Still, no one forgot the bell. They knew what had been awakened once could be awakened again. The knowledge of that power was enough to keep the galaxy careful. Even the most arrogant empires spoke softly when dealing with Earth. They didn't fear punishment. They feared the memory of what had happened when humanity had been pushed too far. On quiet nights, some old soldiers would look at the stars and whisper to themselves that the gods had gone back to sleep. But others believed it was not sleep, it was patience. Humanity was no longer driven by rage. They had found calm after fire, clarity after chaos. In one small colony far beyond Earth, a teacher told her students about those days. The children listened with wide eyes as she spoke about how humanity had once stood alone against the entire galaxy. She didn't describe explosions or battles. She talked about courage, about how people worked side by side when fear tried to divide them. She said that was when humans remembered who they were. Not monsters of war, but protectors of life. And somewhere deep in the galactic archives, a record remained of what the Council had written after the war. It was short, but it carried a warning that every species studied carefully. It said, "Do not wake them unless the universe is ending. For in their silence lives a storm that cannot be controlled." But humanity had moved on from that. They didn't want to be remembered as sleeping gods. They wanted to be remembered as dreamers. New generations grew up under peaceful skies, learning about distant worlds not as enemies, but as neighbors. Spaceports buzzed with travelers of every kind, human and alien alike. Trade and friendship replaced suspicion and fear. Yet even as the galaxy healed, there was always that quiet awareness. Humans were different. They had a spark that no one else had, a spark that didn't depend on power or technology. It came from something deeper, heart, memory, and love. Even the oldest alien philosophers couldn't describe it fully. They called it the human paradox, the ability to be both gentle and terrifying, compassionate and unstoppable, to forgive when others sought revenge, and to rebuild what had been broken even after unbearable loss. That paradox became the foundation of a new era. The galaxy entered what historians would later call the Age of Understanding. The Council no longer ruled by fear or dominance. Instead, every world had a voice. Humanity had taught them that true strength came from cooperation. Back on Earth, humanity looked up at the sky and saw not danger, but destiny. The old warships were now surrounded by exploration vessels, each prepared to travel to unknown regions beyond the mapped galaxy. There were still mysteries waiting, new stars, new species, new challenges. But this time humanity would meet them with open hands, not clenched fists. There was a quiet pride in knowing that the galaxy had once doubted them. They had been seen as fragile beings from a small world, easy to overlook. Now even the oldest empires looked toward Earth for guidance, not because humans ruled, but because humans understood. Every generation passed down the same story, the one about the day the bell rang. It wasn't told to glorify war. It was told as a lesson about unity, courage, and restraint. Parents told it to remind their children that peace is something you protect, not something you wait for. Some people feared that one day the bell might ring again, that somewhere out there, another empire might make the same mistake. But others believed that the lesson had spread too far, too deep into the minds of every intelligent race. They believed no one would ever be foolish enough to wake the sleeping gods again. But even if they did, humanity was ready, not because of their weapons, but because they had learned to stand together. As years turned into decades, humanity's presence stretched further than ever before. Colonies bloomed around distant suns. Human voices echoed in worlds that had once been silent. Artists painted galaxies, musicians wrote symphonies inspired by the stars, and writers told stories of the awakening that changed everything. It was not just a victory of strength. It was a victory of spirit, and yet there was a mystery that never faded. Some believed that when the bell had rung, it hadn't just awakened humans. It had awakened something within the universe itself, a shift, a balance, as if even the stars had remembered who their watchers were. Because after humanity rose, strange things were noticed. Distant galaxies began to shine brighter. New phenomena appeared, like the universe itself had been listening and reacting. Some scientists called it coincidence, others called it fate. But deep down, everyone felt it. It was as if creation itself had acknowledged humanity's awakening. Generations later, those feelings still lived on. Humanity had become both legend and guide. Children who had never seen war grew up knowing peace because of what their ancestors had done. They learned that power isn't in shouting louder, but in knowing when to be silent. The stars themselves seemed to whisper their approval. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, a monument stood, a tall structure made of stone and metal surrounded by light. It wasn't a statue of a person or a ship. It was shaped like a great bell. It didn't make a sound, but every visitor felt its echo in their chest. At the base of it, a single line was written in both human and alien languages. "Let this bell never ring again. But let us never forget why it rang. That monument became a place of reflection. Every species that visited the council made a stop there. Some came to honor the fallen. Some came to understand the cost of pride. And some came to feel that silent reminder of humanity's true nature. Years passed. The galaxy moved forward. Humanity continued to grow, to explore, to dream. They didn't need to fight anymore. They had already proven everything they needed to. The sleeping war gods had returned to their rest, not in defeat, but in peace. And somewhere, beyond the edges of known space, in the quiet black of the universe, something vast and unseen watched. Maybe it was destiny, maybe it was time itself. It watched and it waited, knowing that if the balance ever broke again, humanity would rise once more. But for now, the universe was calm. The stars burned softly, the planets thrived, and the people of Earth slept under peaceful skies. They had earned this silence, and deep in that silence, in the hearts of every human, there was still that ancient rhythm, the heartbeat of sleeping gods, not of destruction, not of rage, but of eternal readiness, the kind that doesn't need to roar to be known, the kind that waits, patient and powerful, beneath the surface of peace. Because humanity had learned something the universe never expected. True power is not in waking, but in knowing when to rest, and so the gods slept again. But the galaxy never forgot the sound of the bell.